Hello, and welcome to a short explanation of question 14 of the first part of the Summa Theologica on God's Knowledge by Sebastian Mahfood for Cynthia Toolan's Christology course. In God, St. Thomas explains, there exists the most perfect knowledge, for it is clear that the immateriality of a thing is the reason why it is cognitive, and since God is in the highest degree of immateriality, it follows that he occupies the highest place in knowledge. In God, knowledge is substance and pure act. Whatever is divided and multiplied in creatures exists in God simply and unitedly. Knowledge is according to the mode of the one who knows, so divine knowledge does not exist in God after the mode of created knowledge. God understands himself through himself. He supremely returns to his own essence and knows himself. The divine intellect is its own perfection and its own intelligible object. God is a pure act, in both the order of existence and in the order of intelligible objects. God perfectly comprehends himself. Everything is knowable according to the mode of its own actuality, so the power of God in knowing is as great as his actuality in existing. The strict meaning of comprehension signifies that one thing holds and includes another. God is said to be in himself, for as much as he is not contained by anything outside of himself, so he is said to be comprehended by himself, for as much as nothing in himself is hidden from himself. God, furthermore, is not to be called finite to himself, as if he understood himself to be something finite. The act of God's intellect is his substance. To understand is not an operation proceeding out of the operator, but remaining in him, so that the act of divine understanding is subsistent, and belongs to its very self, and is not another's. Since the divine power extends to other things, by the very fact that it is the first effective cause of all things, God must necessarily know things other than himself. A thing is known in two ways, in itself and in another. God sees himself in himself, because he sees himself through his essence, and he sees other things not in themselves but in himself, inasmuch as his essence contains the similitude of things other than himself. The object understood is a perfection of the one understanding, not by its substance but by its image. Those things which are other than God are understood by God, inasmuch as the essence of God contains their images. The intellectual operation is specified by the image of the principal thing understood, which in God is nothing but his own essence, in which all images of things are comprehended. God knows things other than himself with a proper knowledge, which consists in some degree of participation in the divine perfection. Now God could not be said to know himself perfectly unless he knew all the ways in which his own perfection can be shared by others. Neither could he know the very nature of being perfectly unless he knew all modes of being. God not only knows that all things are in himself, but by the fact that they are in him he knows them in their own nature, and all the more perfectly each one is in him. These created essences cannot sufficiently lead us to the knowledge of the divine essence, but rather the converse. Because the divine essence excels all creatures, it can be taken as the proper ration of each thing, according to the diverse ways in which diverse creatures participate in and imitate it. In the divine knowledge there is no discursion, for God sees all things in one thing, which is himself, and sees all things together, and not successively. God has only one act, therefore, of understanding, which means he knows things as their cause, and sees their effects in the causes themselves. The knowledge of God is to all creatures what the knowledge of the artificer is to things made by his art. God causes things by his intellect, since his being is his act of understanding, and hence his knowledge must be the cause of things, insofar as his will is joined to it. The knowledge of God is prior to natural things, and is the measure of them. God knows future things from eternity, and although his knowledge is eternal, it does not follow that creatures are eternal. It is possible that things that don't exist might still be present in the mind of God. Whatever we can imagine, or God can do, God knows about them even if they have no being. Those things that are not actual remain true in potentiality. Things in potentiality are known by God, although they are not in act. The cause of things derives from God's knowledge joined to his will. This means that God can know of something, which gives it potentiality, but not will it into being, which would give it actuality. Whoever knows a thing perfectly must know all that can be accidental to it. God would not know good things perfectly unless he also knew evil things. God knows evil because he is the cause of the good, and evil is known as a privation of the good in the effects of God. That is to say, evil is not an independent entity, so it can neither be defined nor known except by good. Anything known by us is also known to God. God's knowledge extends as far as his causality extends. As the active power of God extends not only to forms, which are the source of universality, but also to matter, the knowledge of God must extend to singular things, which are individualized by matter. God knows not only universal, but also singular things through the intelligible species in the divine intellect, which is the essence of God. This immaterial power extends to both immaterial and material things, the latter of which retains a certain likeness to God through its having being. God, whose knowledge is the measure of the essence and truth of things, knows infinite things simultaneously, not successively or quantitatively. God knows future contingent things. Although contingent things become actual successively, nevertheless God knows contingent things simultaneously. The reason is because his knowledge is measured by eternity, as is also his being, and eternity being simultaneously whole comprises all time. Things known by God are contingent on account of their proximate causes, while the knowledge of God, which is the first cause, is necessary. God knows all enunciations that can be formed, for by his understanding his essence, he knows the essences of all things, and also whatever can be accidental to them. God knows enunciable things, then, but not in the manner of enunciable things, which are composite by nature. Since the knowledge of God is his substance, so his knowledge likewise must be altogether invariable. Created things are in God in an invariable manner, while they exist variably in themselves. Anything that exists is known by God from eternity, since it's not like God learns something new when it comes into existence. God understands, furthermore, temporal logic, in that he knows how something can be true at one time and false at another, as in the case of someone sitting now, but not later. God has of himself a speculative knowledge only, for he himself is not operable. But of all other things he has both speculative and practical knowledge. Now of things which he can make, but does not make at any time, he has not a practical knowledge, according as knowledge is called practical from the end, but he has a practical knowledge of what he makes in some period of time. And as regards evil things, although they are not operable by him, yet they fall under his practical knowledge, like good things, inasmuch as he permits or impedes or directs them. The knowledge of God is the cause, not indeed of himself, but of other things. As much as he sees all things other than himself in himself, and he knows himself speculatively, so in the speculative knowledge of himself he possesses both speculative and practical knowledge of all other things. This is the end of question 14 of the first part of the Summa.